Often, families notice changes before the person with hearing loss does. They notice mom or dad starting to withdraw at family dinners, avoiding restaurants, becoming quieter socially, or pretending to understand conversations when they're really struggling to hear properly. And most times, families just think maybe this is part of aging, or maybe they're becoming quieter or more withdrawn. But untreated hearing loss can actually become a much bigger issue than families realize. Because over time, hearing loss can affect communication, confidence, social connection, and even how hard the brain has to work just to keep up with everyday conversations. And that's why researchers and hearing healthcare professionals are paying much closer attention to the connection between hearing loss and cognitive decline. One thing we do have to be careful with when we talk about hearing loss and dementia is this. Research does show an association between untreated hearing loss and increased risk of cognitive decline. But that does not mean hearing loss directly causes dementia in every person. And hearing aids do not cure dementia. But hearing loss is now recognized as one of the largest potentially modifiable risk factors for cognitive decline, meaning it's something we may actually be able to address or improve. And honestly, I think more people are becoming aware of this connection now. Sometimes concerns about cognition are actually what finally motivates families to address hearing loss. One thing I explain to families is that hearing loss is not just about volume. It's also about the strain it places on the brain. When someone has hearing loss, the brain has to work much harder trying to fill in the missing information. So even sitting through conversations can become exhausting. I'll often explain it this way to families. Mom or dad is actively listening to every single word right now, trying to keep up with the conversation. By the time I leave after an hour, they're exhausted. And usually, the person with hearing loss is sitting there nodding because they experience this every day. Sometimes people describe it as listening fatigue. Noisy restaurants become exhausting. Group conversations become difficult. And over time, some people begin withdrawing socially simply because listening becomes too much work. And families often notice the withdrawal before they even recognize the hearing loss itself. I had a family member years ago who would come early to family gatherings when things were quieter and easier to follow. But as more people arrived and conversations grew louder, he would slowly retreat to the chair with the newspaper and eventually wanted to go home. Later, he was diagnosed with dementia. And I hear stories like this from families quite often. Sometimes people begin bluffing in conversations. They smile and nod even when they didn't fully understand what was said. I'll sometimes have adult children at appointments say, "Mom, did you actually hear what Jennifer said?" And sometimes they didn't. Another example I always think about is my grandmother. She was always very easygoing and happy. One day I went to visit her in long-term care, and she was suddenly very grumpy and snapping at me. And I couldn't figure out what was wrong. Then I realized her hearing aid batteries had stopped working. She had the hearing aids in, but she still couldn't hear me properly. As soon as I changed the batteries, her whole demeanor had changed. See, she wasn't able to explain, "I'm frustrated because I can't hear you." But the frustration was very real. And honestly, we see situations like this quite often. Sometimes families think someone is becoming difficult, withdrawn, confused, or irritable when really they're struggling to hear and participate. That's why hearing treatment is often about much more than hearing. It's about communication, confidence, relationships, emotional well-being, and staying connected to the people around you. And early intervention really does matter. Most people wait 7 to 10 years before getting help for hearing loss. That's a very long time for the brain to be working harder than it needs to be. One of the things we also offer in the clinic is a Cognivue cognitive screening assessment. Now, this is not a dementia diagnosis. It's simply a screening tool that helps provide a cognitive baseline and a report people can share with their physicians or specialists if needed. And for many families, having that information can be very helpful. So really, the main message I want people to understand is this. Addressing hearing loss is not just about hearing better. It's about staying connected, engaged, confident, and supported long-term. And if you'd like to learn more about the Cognivue cognitive screening assessment we provide and how it works, I also did another video explaining what the screening involves, what information it provides, and how families are using it as part of a more proactive approach to hearing and cognitive health.